Today we are diving into 3,000 years of incredible history along the Nile River. And we're trying to answer one single massive question. How does a civilization that literally built for eternity just fade away into the sand?
But here's the thing. We're not starting at the beginning. We're going to jump way, way forward in time to around the year 1200 AD. Meet a traveler and a scholar named Abd al-Latif al-Baghdadi. Imagine him journeying to Egypt and just being confronted by these ruins. They're so immense, so mind-bogglingly ancient that he can barely wrap his head around it. He's looking at the ghost of a civilization, and you just have to wonder, who on earth could have built these things? Now, al-Baghdadi was a man of science, a really sharp guy, but here he found a land of wonders whose story was completely lost. He saw all these inscriptions carved into the stone and noted that they were, quote, written in ancient characters that nobody understands. Just think about that for a second. 800 years ago, ancient Egypt was already so ancient that its own language was a total mystery. I mean, for nearly 4,000 years, the Great Pyramid was the tallest thing built by human hands on the entire planet. It just stood there, silently watching empires rise and fall all around it. But if you really want to understand how a civilization could achieve that, and then just vanish, you have to look past the stone. You have to look at the real source of its power, the water.
Look, if you want to understand Egypt, you have to understand the one single life-giving force that created it all, the Nile. This wasn't just a river for the Egyptians. It was the river. It was the absolute center of their entire universe.
Every single year, like clockwork, monsoon rains way down in Ethiopia would swell the river and cause a predictable flood. Now, this wasn't a disaster. Oh no, this was a gift. When the waters finally pulled back, they left behind this layer of rich, dark, fertile mud. This annual cycle was the literal heartbeat of Egyptian life. It dictated their calendar, their survival, and their entire way of looking at the world. And this geography shaped everything about them. For the Egyptians, life was this stark, in-your-face contrast. You had Kemet, the black land, this thin, vibrant ribbon of life right along the river. But then you could literally walk for just a few minutes and be in Deshret, the red land, the endless, hostile, lifeless desert. So for them, this wasn't just geography, it was a cosmic struggle between order and chaos, life and death, that they lived with every single day.
So, you've got this unified kingdom and you have all of this reliable wealth pouring in thanks to the Nile. What do you do with it? Well, if you're the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, you turn all those resources towards one singular, incredibly audacious goal. You try to conquer death itself. You decide you're going to build monuments that will last for eternity. But they didn't just wake up and build the Great Pyramid. No way. It was this amazingly rapid learning curve. It starts with the pharaoh Djoser and his brilliant architect Imhotep. They basically invent the skyscraper by stacking traditional tombs on top of each other, creating the very first step pyramid. Then comes Snefru, a man who was clearly obsessed. His first attempt collapsed. His second had some, let's call them structural issues, which gave us the famous bent pyramid. But he didn't give up. His third try, the Red Pyramid, was the first true smooth-sided pyramid, and that set the stage for his son, Khufu. And what Khufu built is, well, it's just staggering. The Great Pyramid at Giza. We're talking about 2.3 million individual stone blocks, weighing a grand total of 6 million tons. It was a project on a scale the world had never seen before, and honestly, wouldn't see again for thousands of years. So the image we all have in our heads, right? Armies of slaves being whipped, dragging these stones under a brutal sun. But is that really what the evidence tells us? Not even close. Archaeologists have found the workers' village, and the story it tells is of a skilled, respected labor force. These were likely farmers who worked on the pyramids during the flood season when they couldn't tend their fields. They were well-fed, getting daily rations of meat and plenty of beer. They were even organized into competing teams with these awesome names like the Drunkards of Mycorinos. And here's the real kicker. When they died, they were given the great honor of being buried near the pharaohs they served. You just don't do that for slaves. These were proud builders. Now, the age of the Great Pyramids was spectacular, but it was also pretty brief. The 3,000-year history of ancient Egypt wasn't a straight line upwards. It was more like a wave, with these glorious peaks called kingdoms, followed by chaotic valleys, the intermediate periods. So, after all the immense effort of the Pyramid Age, the central power of the Old Kingdom just fractured. The country split apart. But the culture was incredibly resilient. Eventually, a powerful new dynasty of pharaohs rose up from the south, stitched the two lands of Egypt back together, and started a whole new era of stability. And this new era, the Middle Kingdom, had totally different priorities. The focus shifted away from building massive tombs and toward state security, building powerful fortresses to control the borders. And while the Old Kingdom was all about deifying the king, the Middle Kingdom saw this explosion of literature, stories about ordinary people. Egypt would rise again to even greater heights in the New Kingdom, but this cycle of rebirth couldn't last forever. But even a civilization that lasted for 3 millennia, one that survived these cycles of collapse and rebirth again and again, eventually faced a storm of crises it just could not overcome. This is the story of its final long fall.
You know, it wasn't just one single thing that did it. It was a perfect storm. You had 4 major factors all converging at once, each one weakening the state and making the others even worse, until the whole structure just began to crumble.
The trouble started right at the top. The pharaoh Pepi II had this incredibly long reign, but that stability was actually a trap. He ruled for so long that he outlived all of his direct heirs, so when he finally died, it created a massive power vacuum, sparking a chaotic scramble for the throne with no clear successor in sight.
And right as the political order was fracturing, the very source of Egypt's life betrayed them. A severe regional climate event caused the annual Nile floods to fail year after year. For a society built entirely on that river's predictable rhythm, this was an unimaginable catastrophe. It led to crop failure, famine, and the complete breakdown of social order.
With a weak pharaoh and a starving population, power started to decentralize. Regional governors, these guys called nomarchs, who once answered to the king, started acting like they were independent rulers. They seized local resources, raised their own armies, and effectively shattered the unity of the kingdom.
And all this internal weakness, of course, left Egypt vulnerable. For the first time, foreign invaders, the Hyksos from the east, were able to sweep in and conquer the Nile Delta. This was the final blow. While Egypt would have resurgences later, this really marked the beginning of the end for 3,000 years of unbroken, native pharaonic rule.
Which brings us right back to our traveler, al-Baghdadi, standing before the pyramids in 1200 AD. He couldn't read the language, but he understood the deeper message. He knew these stones were a testament to the people who built them, their ambition, their intelligence, and their unshakable belief in eternity.
And that really leaves us with a final thought. Egypt's story shows us that even the most enduring civilizations are vulnerable to climate change, political instability, and internal division. It's a powerful reminder of the delicate balance that holds any society together, and it's a timeless lesson that's literally written in stone.